Hey, it's Sam, and I'm making this video about the current and recent changes that we've experienced with Mars now in Sagittarius and Venus in Libra. So these recent changes have definitely shifted things a bit, for sure, because Mars had been in and out of Scorpio for the most part and joined Saturn since like February of 2016, and he just recently over the weekend went into Sagittarius. So really underscores the difference between Scorpio and Sagittarius. Scorpio is of course ruled by Mars. Saturn was also there, and it's where we strengthen our vulnerabilities and have the courage to do that. Of course, that courage to strengthen our vulnerabilities comes from Mars, because Mars is the ruler of Scorpio. So all of these Scorpio, Mars, emotional, courageous stuff had been sort of percolating since February of this year. And again, these are big challenges that we've had to face, and certainly issues and circumstances that we've had the capacity to surmount if we can rise to the challenge. But it's a challenge, and those of us, let's say, who have Mars, not so strong in our natal chart, for example, or other things, may have found it to be very challenging since February or so of this year. This doesn't even mention the fact that Saturn was also in Scorpio, really bringing a lot of pressure, especially the pressure of time and the regrets from the past and our mistakes into the mix. So not only were we dealing with having to strengthen our vulnerabilities, which would have just been Mars and Scorpio, but then it had been bringing that added pressure of facing our mistakes and being honest and real about our own mistakes in the process, our own tendency to, let's say, blame others or avoid responsibility, to pressure others, to control others, to pressure and control situations. Makes it harder, frankly. It makes it harder to deal with that Scorpio energy and the mission of Mars going through Scorpio. It makes it harder to deal with that when you also have Saturn there. So again, it makes it harder, but it also gave more potential and gave higher consequences. So this is why all of these things come together. It's very easy to want to, as you hear me say all the time, sort of judge astrological placements as good or bad. Well, has it been good or bad that Saturn has also been in Scorpio? Is it good or bad? You don't want to look at it that way. You just want to look at the idea that when you get more stuff, it's a kind of simple idea, but it's very powerful. When you get more stuff concentrated in a certain area of life, it just brings a lot more energy there relative to what the planets are. So the good and the bad potential of Saturn also in Scorpio, joining Mars, had been there. It brings more pressure, brings more awareness of our past and of our mistakes, which doesn't feel so good, but it also gives more potential to get real about those things and to concentrate, and the real need to go deeper into ourself through solitude and introspection and humility at the same time. So it brings the pressure and it brings the solution to the pressure as well. That's what all the planets do. But of course, when you get two natural malefics join, like Saturn and Mars, it's going to feel difficult. And this is one of the main things you can know for sure about the functional and the natural status of the planets. The natural malefics, Saturn, Mars, Rahu, Ketu, they don't feel good. And so we wind up dealing with a lot of that stress and pressure. But again, that is also a great catalyst and creates a great opportunity for us to wield that power as well. And we can wield that power wisely or unwisely. And again, this is why that area of life has been very empowered, but it might be empowered to just lash out and try to control others and situations as well. This is what happens with these placements. We get put in a situation and then we need to respond. And of course, astrology gives us the tools to respond with art and creativity and wisdom, not just triggering and not just through some sort of mechanical triggering process. So Mars moving out of Scorpio away from Saturn, the Saturn-Mars conjunction in Scorpio, and into Sagittarius is much more about hope and wisdom and promise. And hopefully we've learned some lessons around all of these things for the last, several months. And we're not just reacting to our triggering. Now that Mars has gone into Sagittarius, there's more of this sort of spiritual warrior potentiality. The warrior part, of course, is Mars, and the spiritual, optimistic, hopeful part is Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. So you may really be experiencing a kind of natural shift in your gaze and in your focus away from the potential difficulties of Saturn and Scorpio and the expectation of difficulty and stress and fear towards something where there's an expectation of hope and optimism and a sort of new day dawning. And so align your courageous actions with that optimistic possibility now, rather than with this expectation of stress and pressure, which could have very well been the sort of default state of mind since February with Mars, Saturn, and Scorpio. In addition to that, Venus has now gone into Libra, where Venus is very functional. The last couple months, Venus was in Cancer, and then in Leo, and then in Virgo. This is one of the most difficult sections of the zodiac for Venus, by the way. Cancer, it's not so bad because it's ruled by the moon, and it brings a lot of sort of romance, but it's also kind of illusionary, kind of illusory, projection, delusional kind of romance as well. When Venus is in Cancer, it can be, especially if you can be certainly in a romantic state of mind, but it's hard to grasp. And Venus is very much about the negotiation that takes place between two adults. And that's different than the romantic projection that we have. In fact, it's kind of antithetical in some ways. It's kind of opposite. Because we have a sort of romantic vision of another person, a romantic projection of what we would like them to be, of what we're hoping they're going to be, but that's not what they are, ever. Write that down, ever. No one is ever what we project, whether it's romantic or not. Friendships, situations, they always require much more recalibrating of the scales than we imagine. People who have friendships for a long time or have romances, relationships for a long time, it's because they're constantly adjusting to the other person's changing landscape and values. Nothing is static. We never step in the same river twice because the river is different and we're different. Maybe we don't notice it every day, but after 10 years, you notice you have a lot more gray hairs. Well, they actually get grayer a little more each day, but we don't notice. We have a thing called change blindness, where we don't notice subtle changes. Like we don't notice that the earth is turning, but by golly, after a few hours, if you look up, the sun has moved from here to there. The same is true with people and with situations and with relationships. And Venus is the part of us that not only recognizes and is able to adjust, but actually appreciates it and likes it and enjoys the adjustments and finds beauty in all things and finds the beauty and the joy and the value in others and in all situations, and is not in a hurry to get somewhere or fearful of protecting ourselves against something. It's where we're very present to another person's energy and the possibility of sharing and enjoying in a mutual way with another individual. And from there, then the highest octave, and of course that first octave is really typified by Venus as the ruler of Libra and Venus in Libra. So now is a very good time with Venus in Libra for the next couple weeks to really revel in and appreciate and enjoy that compromise with another equal, with another person, like a business partner or a romantic partner. And once we learn how to do that, compromise dance with another, then we find beauty in all things and happiness in all things, which is the very highest octave of Venus, which is shown by the exaltation point of Venus in Pisces. So first we really have to learn to negotiate the interaction with another equal. And that's not a parent and a child or a boss and an employee or anything where there's an imbalance. It's the equal, where you get nothing out of it except the benefit of knowing that that person's happiness is just as important to you as your happiness is. That's the great Venus lesson first as an individual. We come into the world wanting our own happiness and pleasure. And even if it's at the expense of another person, we don't care. Some people never evolve beyond that. And when Venus is really harmed and really weak, and even I might say sort of pathological, people don't evolve beyond that. They stay stuck in their own happiness and pleasure. But a higher vibration of Venus is what we learn, especially through love and romantic love with another person, is that your happiness is just as important as mine. And if my happiness comes at your expense, then I'm not happy either. And then once we learn that, then we learn to find happiness in all things, not just things related to other people. So Venus in Libra is very much the culmination of that middle ground between understanding that my happiness has to come as a result of mutual respect with another person, and that all of my suffering, especially with people, come when I put my pleasure and happiness above another person's, and when I lack the grace to accommodate the beauty that is another person. Because every human being is an incarnation of God. And ultimately, then it's not just about people. Then it's about all animals and all living things. But again, this is the way the planets work. This is the way our consciousness evolves. It's harder for us to find beauty in all things. We don't usually make the leap from my pleasure and happiness to beauty in all things. Usually the intermediary step is other people. We go through the intermediary step of saying, oh, it's not just about my pleasure and happiness. I want to please another person and have their happiness be equal to mine. And that's what Venus in Libra is about. So for the next couple weeks, that will also be important. So here in mid-September, we have this Venus and Mars changing signs. The Sun also just changed signs too, but I'm going to do a separate video about the Sun in Virgo. But a lot of shifting that just happened here in middle end of September, especially as it relates to Mars and Venus, the two planets of our individual strength, which is Mars, and the capacity to yield and compromise that, which is Venus.